It's a little aerobic singing there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You guys cranked that up today. Wow. Good morning, good morning. I'm Reverend C.C. Coltrane, and welcome to Center for Spiritual Living, Greater Dayton. I came across this little piece this morning in the July issue of Science of Mind magazine that I thought was really wonderful. I wanted to share it with you. It comes from an article by Mark Nepo. He says, in the beginning, we can imagine there were two tribes, each with its own way of meeting the world. Upon first meeting a stranger, the fearful one declared, "You're not like me, you're different, go away." The other leaned closer and welcomed the stranger, saying, "You're not like me, come, teach me what I don't know." We're much more that second kind of place. We want to know from you what you know that we don't. We want to share experiences with you so that we grow together into a bigger awareness of our world. So if you're here for the first time, we welcome you especially and thank you for sharing your morning with us. We would absolutely love it if you would fill out that little tear-off strip on the side of your bulletin cover with your email information and how you found out about us, and drop it at the Welcome Center at the end of service. We promise we're not going to do anything with your email address. We will put you on our weekly Wednesday morning spiritual pickup. I send out a really short little message on Wednesdays. You can certainly get off of that, unsubscribe immediately if you don't like it, but I hope you will. And it's just a way for us to be able to say thank you, and we welcome you, and we'd like to learn from you what you know that we don't. Giving our reading and invocation this morning is Lana Mayhew. I haven't quite caught my breath yet. She is our pulpit assistant this morning. Our vigil holder is Lenza Smith, and Lana and Linda Andriaco will offer our interfaith candle lighting, which we do just as a constant reminder that there's wisdom to be had from all the world's spiritual traditions. And the kids are with Stephanie in the garden today. She looks ready, doesn't she? She looks ready for the garden. So our young ones, 5 to 10, will be out playing in the dirt with Stephanie, and the teens are welcome to either stay here in the service or go out and play in the dirt if they prefer. I don't see anyone getting up to run towards you. That must mean you're on your own, kid.
It's that scary hat, man.
Yes. There are a few cucumbers left. There will be tomatoes by the end of service. Please take them.
Oh yeah, there's a bucket of cucumbers by the door, and we'll have some tomatoes. They are organic, of course, and raised by our kids. So how much better does it get, right? So a couple of announcements. First, I want to say thank you for your amazing generosity in our school supplies drive for the kids at Choices Foster Care. These are the kids that are aging out of foster care and moving into their last year or so of high school and their first years of college. I think we took like 75 notebooks and a pile of binders and planners and about 1 million highlighters and 8 or 9 backpacks and more to them last week. So we did good. Thank you very much, everybody who contributed. It's really good. We're going to be doing some more with them because these are also the kids that are moving into independent living out of foster care situations. So we're going to help them set up their kitchens next, because you can imagine moving into an apartment with nothing in it. I think it'll help them if we give them maybe a dish drainer and some pots and pans, right? Maybe some dish towels. So we'll keep you posted on that. I invite you to check your bulletin for events that are coming up. There's a calendar on the back. Next out of my mouth, Kenny. Great minds think alike. There's also a flyer. And I want to tell you that on September 2nd, Jessie Powers is going to be back. Do y'all remember her? She's this young and fabulous singer from Columbus who plays the guitar and writes these outrageously good songs, and she's filled with life and joy and talent, and she'll be back on September 2nd, so please come back. And Becky too. Oh, it'll be like a chorus of angels, won't it? Woo! I am excited. We have 2 workshops coming up, one on September 28th and one on October 2nd. The September 28th one is by one of our ministerial students, Russell Gear. He's coming down to speak and then offer a workshop. And October 7th, we'll have Kathy Roush, who is also from Columbus. She's an artist who teaches you how to create mandalas that are exquisite, and I can't tell you how cool it was. She sent a package with me when I went to Hocking Hills with my sister, and I drew for the first time in my life something freehand that I was in love with and proud of, because I am no artist. It's a wonderful, meditative, creative process, and she'll be here on October 7th to share that with us. We're also starting a foundations class sometime this fall. Have to get an answer from Becky as to when, but we'll give you more information. That's a real life changer. It's a 10-week class, so we'll give you more about that in a week or so. And just a reminder that our practitioners are here to pray with you after the service. If there's anything that you're struggling with, or maybe you'd like a little spiritual clarity on, you can just walk up to any of the people wearing the white or teal stoles and ask them for prayer. It's their gift to you on Sundays. And with that, it's time for the band. It's time to hear Jimmy singing Waiting on the World to Change.
We light the first candle in honor of Christianity. This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. And if we know what He hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of Him. We light the second candle in honor of Judaism. May my prayer be said before you like incense. May the lifting up of my hands be like the evening sacrifice. Set a guard over my mouth. Lord, keep watch over the door of my lips. We light the third candle in honor of Islam. Hold on to your salah, your prayer, because if you lose that, you will lose everything else. We light the fourth candle in honor of Buddhism. Evoking the presence of great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that all living beings realize that they are all brothers and sisters, all nourished from the same source of life. We light the fifth candle in honor of Native American religions. Rise with the sun to pray. Pray often and alone. The Great Spirit will listen only if you speak. We light the sixth candle in honor of Hinduism. Prayer is a key of the morning and the bolt of the evening. We light the seventh candle in honor of spirituality of the Maori people. May the peace of the sky above, of the earth below, and of all embracing universe rest upon us. Beautiful it is life. The reading today is by Ernest Holmes, Affirmations and Denials in Treatment. The practitioner deals with the argument of negation which appears as wrong things or wrong conditions by using the opposite argument of truth based upon the reality that God is all there is. The mental argument continues until the mind of the practitioner is satisfied with the evidence he or she has produced. The practitioner deals with the negation more as though it were a hypnotic suggestion than as though it were a reality. So if you guys can just take these words into that sacred place for a few minutes of contemplation. So how good it is to know that the very breath that I am breathing is God breathing me. It is pulsating this blood throughout my body, mind, temple. It is that very infinite energy that moves us and is through us and as us, as this very moment, that this is the only power in the universe. It's a power for good. It's a powerful manifestation that moves through us right here and right now. And I know that this same energy, the same power is imbued within every cell of our body. There is no way to be separate from this energy of God. It is what is orchestrating this whole entire service with our band, with Reverend Cece, with the Children's Church, with this congregation, with every single person on this planet right here, right now, that it is this very essence of who we truly are, God expressing. And I give such thanks for this, knowing that this time together is in divine order and divine right action, that we all have that peace and that we are blessed. And I say thank you, God. And together we say, and so it is.
First off, there's something a little edgy going on here this morning, so I just invite everybody to take a big breath. Drop your shoulders and relax. It's all good, right? It's all good. I think maybe it was Jimmy being nervous about singing. Maybe that's what I'm feeling. We are in the middle of a deep exploration of the spiritual practice of prayer, the way that we talk about it here. It's affirmative prayer. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that this form of affirmative prayer that we practice, that we call spiritual mind treatment, encompasses a whole bunch of the foundational pieces of our philosophy in a single, very powerful package. And I have to tell you that as I'm preparing my talks over these weeks, I'm coming to a whole new appreciation for how powerful the practice is. I said last week, it's about applying a curative to our minds, a curative for the patterns of thinking that cause us pain, that keep us limited, that make us feel like we don't belong. It's a curative for those thought patterns. And last week we talked about the first two steps of spiritual mind treatment, this curative, as being rooted in the mystical. It's in that place of connecting in conscious awareness with spirit. In recognition, we pause and open and recognize that spirit, that God, that the intelligence of the universe is everywhere, and that it fills all time and it fills all space with itself. And then in unification, the second step, we realize that if the first step is true, spirit must be here too. It must be us. It must be in us and around us and with us and as us. And I came across this definition of prayer this last week. It's from Rocco Errico, who was an Aramaic scholar of the Bible. And he said, in Aramaic, the word for prayer is slotha, which means to trap, to catch all the goodness of God. You have to set your mind where you can be still, so you can trap the thoughts, the ideas, the counsel, the kingdom of God in your own heart, and then express it. That's the meaning of prayer, he said, to keep us in that connectedness with God. I love this notion of setting a trap so you can catch the goodness of God. Because that's what all spiritual practice is in essence, isn't it? We are trying to train the mind and the heart to the point where we catch all the goodness of God, where we bring this kingdom and queendom of heaven right into our own hearts. That's the whole point of spiritual practice, I think. And we need a curative because we've been wrongly trained. We've been wrongly trained to think and believe that life is full of hardship and shortcomings and difficulties and limitations, and that we are limited and alone and we always fall short. We're trained up that way. We're taught in our culture, whether we grew up in a religion that taught us this or not, in our culture there's this whole background of original sin. We're born sinful and we can't really escape it. We absorb that, as I say, from the culture, or maybe we learn it from our teachers, our parents primarily, because they were so confused about it, because they had absorbed it from their culture and they didn't quite know what to do with it. My parents told me that I could do anything I wanted to. And at the same time, every time I had a big dream or a big idea, they ridiculed me. And they pointed out how it wouldn't work and what I wasn't doing right towards it, and et cetera, and et cetera. They thought it was to protect me. But what I got from those mixed messages, that I was very confused. That there was something in me that would never fill the bill. That I was ridiculous. That I was the one who didn't achieve this benchmark, which was always moving, by the way. I don't know about your parents, but with my parents, it was always moving. You know, maybe you got some of that confusion too. Or maybe we've excluded the idea of a higher power altogether. I did for a long time. So whenever we start to think about getting still and opening up to something larger, there's a part of us that says, nothing exists there. There is no power of the universe. There's no such thing as the goodness of God. Or maybe we get past that place and we can't then make the leap to include ourselves in it. I think this troubles a lot of us. And there are, of course, certain people that we want to carve out of that too and say, well, maybe that one is in the goodness of God, but not that one, bless her heart, right? We have the belief that only some people are good enough or holy enough or advanced enough or intuitive enough to have that deep connection with God, but we certainly aren't. Whatever those old beliefs and thinking patterns are, when we do sit down in stillness, alone, to, as Ernest Holmes, our founder, said, think about God, they rise up to meet us. They show themselves to us. And so what I want to talk about today is another way in which we deal with those negative thought patterns when they come up. Ernest Holmes and his teacher, Emma Curtis Hopkins, who taught Charles and Myrtle Fillmore and all sorts of people, talked about a process they called denial as a method of getting ourselves unstuck from our old thought patterns. In the book, Living the Science of Mind, which we're reading from, he said, there's an approach to the practical application of affirmative prayer that is argumentative, is what he called it. He said, the argumentative method is one wherein a series of mental arguments is used to erase a negative mental conviction. It may seem strange, but this idea is rapidly being accepted by many psychologists. Remember, that was almost 100 years ago. Out of the years of practical experience, they have learned that the inertia of thought patterns is so great that it is, and so difficult to remove from the consciousness, that they sometimes think of these thought patterns, they sometimes speak of these thought patterns as actually arguing back, refusing to be dislodged. That's a pretty accurate description, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I can sometimes hear those guys in there. I can hear the voices saying, you're not one with God. You're not enough. You're not worthy. You're separate and alone and powerless. What you're thinking is impossible. I hear those voices. Am I the only one? No, I didn't think so. Somehow I didn't think so. I think it runs very deep in us. Emma Curtis Hopkins, as I said, Ernest Holmes' teacher, said we have a conviction of absence rather than a conviction of presence. So what we need is a curative for that conviction of the absence of the goodness of God. What do you hear when you sit down and think about that higher power and your place in the universe? Probably a lot of things that could not possibly be true. They simply couldn't be true. Because if there is one life, one power, one God encompassing everything, we cannot be alone. We cannot be separate. We cannot be all stuck out in space by ourselves. It's impossible, right? It's impossible. And then, you maybe have to go back a step from that and realize that if there were other than one, what was it Jesus said? A house divided against itself cannot stand. If there was something opposed to that one, I think the universe would have gone up in smoke a long time ago. If they were evenly matched enough to fight it out for all those eons, The universe would have gone up in smoke, ultimately. This is the gist of this argumentative approach that Ernest Holmes was talking about. We logically and patiently work with our own consciousness until we can convince ourselves to think differently, which leads eventually to us believing differently. We work with our consciousness until we can embrace something bigger, instead of staying in the cramped, dark hallways of our own thoughts. Last week I quoted my colleague from Santa Rosa, Dr. Edward Villune. He said there are two possibilities, and only two. Either God is all there is, or God is not all there is. And the first is infinitely preferable. If there's any part of our minds that holds out a separation from the one, that is the place to begin. That is the place to begin. This is where the logic of denial and argumentation can come in very handy, because there's sometimes a voice that says maybe God isn't all there is, or maybe there are places where spirit is not, where the goodness, the thing, whatever, however you think about it, the intelligence, the consciousness of the universe isn't present. That's when we have to get really patient and really logical and say, wait a minute. If, pick any one of these. Spirit is the consciousness that underlies all things. If God is the intelligence that somehow created everything from the only thing that was present, it. If indeed God is the conscious creative force of the universe, how could it not be everywhere? I think it becomes obvious that if we look around and do not see God, it is an error in our seeing, not a fact, not a truth. There's a funny little story in the 11th chapter of the book of Mark, and you've probably heard it. Jesus and his disciples are walking down the road, and Jesus decides he's hungry. So he sees a fig tree, and he goes over to see if the fig tree has any fruit on it, bearing in mind it is not the season for figs. And of course the tree doesn't have any fruit on it. It's not the season for figs. But despite that, he says to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And they go on. And they go back to wherever they were sleeping that night, and the next day they're walking back along the same road. And which one is it? Peter notices that the fig tree has withered from its roots and says, "Rabbi, look, the tree you have cursed has withered." Emma Curtis Hopkins says that this story demonstrates, she says, "I say unto you, you may blast such words of doubt as Jesus blasted the vigorous fig tree, and never see the fruit of any mistake that brings hurt or misfortunes." So we blast the idea that is causing us pain with the truth. We blast it out of existence. We blast it with a different idea. An idea of the goodness of God we're opening up to. We blast it with this argument that since God is all, then that must be true even when we can't see it. If God is all, then I am part of it even if I don't see it at the moment. If we were separate, it would mean that God is not all there is. Right? We blast our unbelief with a clear statement of that which makes sense, that which we want to believe. I am one with all that is. Spirit is all that is. I am one with Spirit. It is all I could ever be. I can never be separate from the goodness of life. Only Emma Curtis Hopkins would say that very loud and very vigorously, and probably in really strong, much stronger words, because that's how she was. Now, if blasting isn't your style, that's okay. Think of gentle persuasion instead. We stop and think about the origin stories of all the world's religions. Or we stop and think about the theory of science that we call the Big Bang. That everything, there was nothing, and then Everything arose from one instantaneous event. Everything. It either arose directly or it arose as the result of a chain of events that came out of that initial event. It all happened then, right then. Something caused that, something, as I say, thought into being. Oh, here's a system that I could, I could instigate, I could catalyze, and wondrous things would come of it, whatever that intelligence was. Everything in our bodies, every subatomic particle, every molecule, the breath we breathe, the consciousness in our minds, everything originated in that moment. There's no logical way for us to be separate and alone in this universe because literally we are interconnected as well as spiritually. Whatever way we choose to approach it. What we're doing is arguing with those old ways of thinking, inching them towards the door of our consciousness so that we may eventually usher them right out. That's what argumentative prayer is about. We're clearing the way for a different pattern of thought to be established in our minds so that we can dwell on that, something that brings us peace instead of pain, something that brings us hope instead of despair, something that brings us joy instead of suffering. It doesn't happen instantly. That's why it's a spiritual practice. Emma Curtis Hopkins again. I was rereading her book, Scientific Christian Mental Practice, which is one of the textbooks that we read in the Roots class and other places. She was very powerful. And she said, suppose the rain and the dust have beaten against the plate glass windows until they are very dirty. Do you think the mere cessation of the rain and dust will make the window panes clean? So it is with the mind that is covered with years of habitual imaginations. It ceases from imaginations, but practical daily washings of the dust of years must be made. So we have to wash the windows until they're clean, until we can see clearly through them, until the voices in our heads stop whispering to us. Well, maybe those other guys, but not you. Or maybe her, but not him. Until the voices are quiet. And so then after that, all that's required is a little touch-up now and then, right? Because the dust doesn't get a chance to build up. And of course, it isn't enough to simply blast the untruth from our minds. It isn't enough to simply show it the door and evict it. We have to give the mind a new track of thinking, a track of spiritual truth, so that it begins to follow that track instead of the old track. It's sort of like the water with which we rinse the soapy windows after we've begun to dislodge the dirt and dust. We follow the argument which is the denial of what is not true, with an affirmative statement of what is true. After we come to the realization that it makes no sense to think we could be separate from everything else and not interconnected, then we affirm that we are indeed one with this goodness of God. And we're going to quote Emma Curtis Hopkins one more time because this statement is so beautiful. She said, "Within each of you is the song of the Spirit. By thinking out that song in your mind, it will break forth over your affairs. You can sing mentally until a joy of heart takes possession of you." So we show the negative ideas the door. We get them out of there. We clean our windows. We start singing. We start singing and we sing a song of the goodness of God, of the kingdom or queendom of our own souls. When we sing that new song, we start to feel ourselves becoming joyful and free and light and peaceful and happy and abundant. And as my friend Reverend Edward put it, that is infinitely better than the alternative. So today my wish for you, my hope for you, my invitation to you is to argue for yourself. For yourself. Argue for the truth of your own being. Sing the song of the goodness of God. Catch that goodness. This is prayer. It's not anything else. It truly is catching the goodness of God. Hey, Kenny.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray now. So let's pray together. Just relax into our chairs and move into that clean and sparkling light. There is only one life in the universe. It is that intelligence, that consciousness, that boundless love that created out of itself, out of its own being, using its own consciousness and its own power. Everything that exists. There was nothing, and then all of a sudden, things were happening. Matter was being created. Light and heat and energy were being generated. There was nothing, and then there was something. And that something continued to grow and change and become all that is, from here until the very edge of the universe, filled with planets and stars and nebula and gas clouds and asteroids and meteors and all manner of amazing things. And this planet that we live on, the one that we know the best, something magical happened. Inert turned into something alive, and that something alive has produced everything that exists. From the tiniest microbe to blue whales, and once even larger dinosaurs. It has produced the simplest of consciousness, that of the consciousness of dust and stones, to that self-consciousness that lives in us. It has produced every color of the rainbow, every form of life imaginable, and continues to do so as new forms emerge, as new ways of being are found on this earth. And it continues to emerge as each one of us, in our imaginations, in our ideas, in our creativity, in our love for one another, in our ability to say yes to all of life. God is expressing everywhere, including right here where I am, right here where each one of us is. There is a boundless love that wells up from the center of our being. There is a flow of life and energy and abundance and joy that wells up inside of us and seeks expression by means of us. And as we clear away the debris of suffering, of judgment, of pain, of error, of limitation, of thinking somehow we are not worthy, that life pours forth. As the poet said, there is a light within us that can never be dimmed, and it is our job to keep the lens clean so that that light may shine forth. And that is what we do when we say simply to those old erroneous ideas, get out of here, be gone. Thank you for sharing. I don't need you anymore. Let me show you the door. And we welcome in a bigger thought. We welcome in a thought of joy, a thought of peace, a thought of happiness, a thought of abundance, a thought of love for ourselves and our fellows, a new way of being that shifts everything. It shifts the way we walk in our own lives. It shifts the way we speak to one another. It shifts our willingness to reach across any aisle and take the hand of someone we don't yet know and say, teach me what you know that I don't, and I will do the same for you. It shifts us into a new order of being. And I know that's simply the truth of who we are, that when we do these practices, everything changes. As we allow the goodness of God to be planted in our own hearts, in that intersection of heart and mind we call the soul, that animates all that we do. And so I say thank you. I say thank you for this time we've had together today, for this amazing community of people whose hearts are ever glowing more brightly, whose lives are ever shining more beautifully. I say thank you for this amazing journey we are on together. I say thank you for life itself, amazing and complex and wonderful and filled with the goodness of God. And in this place of gratitude, I just let go. I let go and I let God. We release it and we say together, and so it is. Amen. Now we have an opportunity to contribute to the support of the work that this wonderful group of people does in the world. You know, everything we do supports the idea that together, you know, today we can create a world that works better for everyone. Ultimately, we will create a world that works great, that works for everyone. And everything we do supports that mission. So I invite you to give consciously what you can in support of this community and its work. And take your gift in your hands or in your heart if you give electronically. By the way, you can also give by text. It's very easy. And affirm with me. I know the activity of abundance. In my life and in this center, I give and receive generously from this everlasting flow of good. And so it is. That's it for today, everybody. Thank you to everyone who is here today making this service possible. Thank you to our ushers and greeters, to our garden lady, to the welcome team, the practitioners, the band, as always. Thank you guys. You're amazing. And all of you for being here. Yay. Let's stand for our closing affirmation and our closing song, which will take us out of here on high note, holy ground. I affirm the truth.
I affirm the truth.
I deny what is not the truth.
I deny what is not the truth.
The windows of my mind become clear.
The windows of my mind become clear.
And I know I belong
And I know I belong
in the goodness of spirit.
in the goodness of spirit.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody.